It's been a while, but we're finally back.
Long holiday hiatus, but we're back. And oh boy, is there a lot to talk
There's
about.
so much.
So much that we had to trim. We had to put our list on a diet. There was so much to consume, we had to put it on a strict diet.
We may have talked for 20 minutes before we started because there are so many things on our list that we just can't make it. So if we missed your favorite news story, sorry. Over the break, sorry. Okay, so first things first. This is a Stu favorite.
Yes, this is my favorite. Okay, I love The Crown. The Netflix series,
if
The
you
Crown.
hadn't caught that already.
I know way too much about the British royal family than, like, somebody should know. Just the other night, we were with some friends, and he served his mission in England, so we were talking, like, all things British. And I was just, like, throwing out random facts and things I knew about the British royal family, and Emily was like, holy crap, how do you know all this? So, I am here for all things The Crown, and if you're like me, you watch The Crown with your phone or iPad, and you're just Wikipediaing everything the whole time, like, oh my gosh, how did this really happen like this? And, like, all the background, so
Right.
that's how I crown it. But, if you have been following The Crown and the casting, they are switching out the cast members for season 3, because they're getting older, and they
Right.
want people to actually look the age rather than, like, through makeup, which
Yeah.
is really cool. I mean, it's sad because we have to say goodbye to Claire Foy and Matt Smith and Vanessa Kirby, and they're just so great. But they've already cast Queen Elizabeth Coleman.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Her name is Elizabeth. Fun fact. Now, I'm hearing rumors, and this is the big thing that I'm excited for, that Helena Bonham Carter is going to play Princess Margaret in the next season. And ooh boy, would that be so great. If you don't know Helena Bonham Carter, she played Bellatrix Lestrange in the Harry Potter series.
Right.
She was Madame Thénardier in the Les Mis movie, among several other
She was the
things.
Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland. Was she Queen of
Fairy-
Hearts? Yeah.
Fairy Godmother in the new Cinderella.
Yeah. I mean, she's a killer actress. She's really great.
Amazing. And she's actually no stranger to playing members of the royal family, because she
Really?
played the Queen Mother in the Oscar-winning film The Queen's Speech.
Huh.
So she's played Margaret's mother, and now she might be playing Margaret. And if you know the character of Princess Margaret, and you know, like, Helena Bonham Carter, it's just a perfect match. Because
Yeah.
Princess Margaret is a little bit rebel. She's likes to do things her way, and I just think Helena Bonham Carter would bring the right nuance to the role.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
So when I saw that, I was just loving everything about it, and The Crown is awesome if you're a history nerd like me. So, okay, that's enough nerding about The Crown. Moving on.
We have to get to
So,
my nerd thing.
This is a good segue into your
Geeking
nerd thing.
Yeah.
So 2017 was a big year for movies, which...
Especially movies with female leads.
Yes. I saw an interesting fact that I would like to share. So the 3 most popular movies of 2017 were Beauty and the Beast, Wonder Woman, and The Last Jedi. And what's interesting about them is they were all led by females. They all had a strong female role leading them. What's
Or
interesting...
Multiple. In
Yeah.
some cases, right?
But
So.
that hasn't happened for over 37 years. The 3 top movies were, like, female-led.
Really?
So that was
That's-
pretty cool.
Yep. That is pretty cool. The thing that is very interesting, we'll get to this later, we're going to talk about the Golden Globes in a minute, but very interesting about that is that in addition to that, it's the Golden Globes, like, recognizes, like, the you know, they nominate the top whatever, it's like 5 or 6 directors, and none of them were women. So that was just interesting.
Yep.
But that brings us into The Last Jedi, which I saw over the break, and oh my goodness, I was just in geek heaven. It was kind of incredible. I still need to see it again, just because there's so many nuances and you have so many different plot lines and so many different, like, throwaway, they're not really throwaway, but, like, when you see it the first time, you're trying to get the main storyline right and wrap your head around it, and so there are these little things that you're missing, and I've been listening to podcasts about it and things that they're teasing out after having seen it multiple times. I'm like, okay, I have to go back and see that. But it, like, it caused a lot of uproar. I'm trying not to give any spoilers, so I'm, like, not going to give away any plot points, but as much as I can. But there's been a lot of uproar about it, and a lot of people being like, what did I just see? This isn't, I don't like this movie. Like, and a lot of that is that there it does depart from what we normally know as a Star Wars movie. So when the Force Awakens came out, it was criticized for following the storyline of A New Hope a little too closely, and this one, it does, like, there are plot points that are very similar to Empire Strikes Back from the original trilogy, but it takes its own twist on things, and it changes things up, and you do things, and a lot of this is about loss and things that they did and they failed. And I mean, you have all of this stuff where this one is an actual war movie. In a lot of ways, it's not quite as extreme as Rogue One, where everyone dies, but it is a war movie where you get to know that loss and you understand what's going on, and it was just a really phenomenal movie, and it made me appreciate the characters so much more in the storyline, and I really just absolutely loved it, and loved the way that they showed growth and depth of character, increasing depth of character in each of the characters, especially Poe Dameron. He kind of has the story arc where he does something stupid at the beginning, like really stupid, and then by the end of it, he's like trying to prevent someone else from doing this stupid thing. And so it's just this wonderful, like, it only takes place over a couple of, maybe not even days, it's it's a space of 2 days, right after The Force Awakens ends, and it is just incredible. And it's done something really interesting. A lot of the Star Wars movies play on political themes that are happening during this time, and this one plays a lot on the insurgent theme. The Resistance and the Rebellion have always been an insurgency type force against, like, the First Order as a government, but this one plays on the fact that both factions are insurgents. Both the Resistance and the First Order are insurgencies. The First Order's just been a little bit more effective as an insurgency, and so you've got this character who's torn in the middle, Kylo Ren, who is torn between two insurgencies and being pulled to one side or the other, and basically he is the privileged white boy who is being brainwashed or pulled to one side or the other. And so it's just this incredible film about, I mean, he is the core character. He is one of the core characters, but this movie isn't just about him, right? Or Rey, because you also learn more about Rey. It's about the whole group. It's about, you see growth in Poe, you see growth in Finn. You get to spend equal time with every one of the characters. You get to know Laura Dern's character, Admiral Holdo, pretty well before she leaves the story. And I mean, there's just so much going on, and so many people that you come to love. And one of my favorite characters is actually Kelly Marie Tran, who plays Rose, and she's just a strong character who comes from nowhere and proves her worth through the course of the movie. So anyway, it's really good. I'm going to stop talking now, because otherwise I'm going to give away plot points. But it's just really good, and if you're a Star Wars fan, you should have seen it already. And if you aren't, it's worth seeing at least once when, you don't have to spend super amounts of money on it.
I just have one question for you. Was it, like, on the same level as Force Awakens for you? Quality and story-wise? Because I've seen a lot of Star Wars fans online that say it isn't. That it's below Force Awakens.
It's different. Like, for me, it's different. And so I was, like, wrapped in my seat for 2.5 hours. Like, I could not, wrapped as in RAPT. I was, like, completely entranced for 2.5 hours trying to get my head around the story. And I liked that about it. It's a very cinematically beautiful movie, and there are some things that, like, you kind of pulled you out of the story sometimes. There was one scene in particular that pulled me out of the story, but I don't know that I could rank them. I think that in terms of rewatchability, I would rewatch The Last Jedi more than I would rewatch The Force Awakens, but I think that story-wise, they've done a really good job. The thing that I was reading an analysis today about how The Force Awakens, like, didn't adequately set up The Last Jedi, because in The Force Awakens, you should have gotten to know that, like, when we were taking out the Hosnian system, literally, when the Starkiller base took out the Hosnian system, where the Republic was, like, they literally took out the whole fleet from the Republic. Like, the Resistance is completely in this completely shattered point of space. They don't have anything anymore, and so you're moving into this realm where that the Force Awakens didn't set that up in a way that allowed you to fully feel the impact in The Last Jedi. And so I think there's a couple of atmospheric things that, like, you have to watch those together, and you have to do a little bit of digging to find out exactly what's going on, because otherwise you miss the impact of the first half of The Last Jedi, and then it kind of, you already have it sinking in towards the end of The Last Jedi what's going on, because you've lost so many people already, and you've lost so much, and so that's just really fascinating. So
interesting.
yeah.
Thank you from a true Star Wars fan, Brigida Hugh, everybody.
Just a little bit. It's fine.
All right, moving on. So, as we remember with the whole Me Too movement and the whole sexual misconduct and harassment thing that's, reckoning that started with Harvey Weinstein, that went across everywhere. And one of the hardest hit were the TV morning shows. There was Matt Lauer from the Today Show and Charlie Rose from CBS This Morning. And so those happened about, was it mid-January, early January? And so they've kind of just been having, like...
We're in the middle of January.
I mean, December.
It happened late November.
Oh,
because it was right before...
It was right after
Matt
Thanksgiving.
Lauer, was it right after?
Yeah, because he hosted the Thanksgiving parade, yeah.
That's right. Okay.
So it was like late November, early December, but they've been kind of having hosts on an interim basis, but they finally... Both the shows announced recently their new permanent co-hosts. So for the Today Show, it's Hoda.
So it's the first time that the Today Show has been hosted by two women.
Which is notable.
Yep.
It's kind of cool that they replaced him with a woman, and, it has a lot of symbolism to it.
Yeah.
And then on CBS This Morning, they're replacing Charlie Rose with John Dickerson, which is an interesting move because John Dickerson is host of Face the Nation, and he's, like, usually, like, a really straight-faced, like, hard news, like...
Yeah.
Whereas, like, the morning shows are really fluffy. Like, you talk about celebrities and...
You talk about
You do
fashion.
talk a little bit of politics, but fashion and the latest trends and...
Because news hasn't been
and
made
memes.
yet,
yeah, so it's interesting that they're putting kind of like a hard news guy in there.
That's interesting.
But CBS This Morning has 3 co-hosts, and 2 of them are women, and 1 of them's a man. So...
Okay.
So women are dominating the morning shows these days,
And
which
that's
is not
wonderful.
surprising, seeing in the national climate that we're in.
Mm-hmm. All right, next thing is a new movie that has come out, or is coming. Technically, it was released around Christmas time, but that was a limited release. Now they're releasing it everywhere starting tomorrow. That's The Post. So it's the story of the Washington Post having received the Pentagon Papers in the Vietnam War, which were like all of the conversations that were highly classified that Washington had, like basically saying, yeah, we know this is a bad idea, but we have to do it anyway. Because if you don't know that the Vietnam War was entered into basically as a huge mistake that we just kept losing, that you need to know that. There's a little bit more nuanced explanation of it, but the Vietnam War really was like, we got into it and then we didn't feel like we could get out, and we didn't want to, and it ended up being
Drug
like,
on forever.
It was like a 10-year war that we were involved in, and in the end we did lose. Like, it's this huge thing it's this huge stain. People wouldn't talk about it for years. The Vietnam vets came back and were just completely ostracized a little bit. Like, they were not accepted back into society because they'd fought this war that was so taboo. When the Vietnam Memorial went up in Washington, D.C., it was like a huge deal because it does look like because it's this black obelisk with all the names of the men we lost. It kind of has this like grave-like feeling. Anyway, it's a big thing. But this is about the Washington Post decision to release the Pentagon Papers and what Nixon was going to do about that. And it looks so good. Meryl Streep plays the woman who owned the Post at the time, and Tom Hanks plays her right-hand man. And it looks so
Could you have a more
good.
dynamic duo? I mean,
No.
Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks are like...
And I don't think they've played in a movie together before.
They
I
haven't.
think this is their first movie
Which
together.
is surprising because they're both so good, and they're the greatest living actors that we have at this point, I would say. They've both won Oscars. I mean, they're so prolific and so renowned and so well loved.
Good.
And it is kind of shocking that they have never been in a film together before.
But this, for the first film that Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks are in, this is delightfully wonderful. And the posters and the trailers are just like, already I'm like sitting back and going, okay, when can I go? So it just looks really good. It's one of those political thrillers that promises to be more than that. So holding the government accountable. All right, moving on.
So the last thing that we have to talk about, which would be a great segue, are the Golden Globes, which were held this past Sunday.
Yeah.
So the Golden Globes are really the first. They're always like the 1st of January. They're the first of the award season circuit. And so they're kind of like a bellwether for the Oscars and other award shows to come. It's the first big buzzy award show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because this is the first award show since the Harvey Weinstein scandal and the whole Me Too movement and the sexual misconduct, like, national environment.
That swept through everything.
This is the first one. And so it's interesting. Seth Meyers was hosting, and he made several jokes about that.
Yeah.
And definitely made a point to, like, bring that up. And I think the best joke was he said that Harvey Weinstein wasn't there, but he would be back in 20 years to be the first person booed in the in memoriam section.
Yeah, that was a good one. He also made a joke about, like, he couldn't figure out why a woman wasn't hosting the Golden Globes. And then he said, as a consolation prize, I am a man in Hollywood, but I'm virtually powerless. Like, I have no power. So, the thing about this one, though, is that right before the Golden Globes, there was this movement announced called Time's Up. And it's over 300 women, both mostly in the entertainment business. There's also lots of women who are in law, in a lot of, like, it's just this huge women's movement to basically say it's time's up on sexual misconduct and sexual harassment in the workplace. And they've created this legal fund. I mean, it's a lot of other things, but at the core, it's this legal fund that it will provide money to women in occupations like agricultural occupations, service occupations like hotel cleaning staff and stuff like that, who don't have the ability to secure legal representation for themselves in seeking to prosecute their attackers. And so this fund provides them the legal counsel and the funding to pay for that legal counsel to be able to call out these people who are doing terrible things. So it's this huge thing, but it was announced right before the Golden Globes. And then at the Golden Globes, most of the women wore black. There were a couple of women who didn't, but they mostly wore black. And also, did you see the emerald jewelry?
No.
There was this big thing about emerald jewelry. So
I saw the pins. A lot of them were wearing Time's Up pins.
So the emerald jewelry and the emerald makeup and stuff like that is actually a throwback to the suffrage movement when women would wear white, black, and green. So there were a lot of women wearing green, but it was in support of this Time's Up movement. A lot of, like, big actresses like Emma Watson, Meryl Streep, who else? They brought Michelle Williams. They brought
Emma Stone, activists.
Yeah, I brought activists with them as their guests to the Golden Globes. So that was really cool. And then Oprah Winfrey received this Lifetime Award. And her speech, it was really, really...
It was a barn burner.
It was so good. She talked about Reese Tyler, who was a young African-American woman who was raped and badly... Was she beaten? I can't remember. I read the story earlier this week. Anyway... It was this terrible story. She recently passed away, but she's one of those stories that we haven't really heard. And so she talked about that. She talked about some other things, but some people were touting this as a presidential speech. We have a low bar, and saying that Oprah should run for president. We both have feelings on this.
We do. Honestly, at this point, Oprah would be leaps and bounds better than Donald Trump. I mean, right. Anyone would be leaps and bounds better than Donald Trump. So, like, if I had to choose between the two, I would choose Oprah. But I think we need to be careful. Like, is the age of qualification and experience gone? Like, has Donald Trump swept away the fact that, like, our presidents used to be, like, senators for years and decorated military commanders and generals and, like, had experience running government? I mean, are those days over? I sincerely
hope not.
I just think it's a little in the new Trump era. You know, everyone thinks that they should run for president. I think, you know, there's always the age-old saying, like, this is America where anyone can run for president, which is true. But I don't think everybody should.
Right. I think that the thing that's different, and I don't think that there's something against actors and artists running for president and celebrities running for president. Ronald Reagan was
an
a celebrity. Arnold Schwarzenegger was a celebrity.
True.
Al Franken, it was a celeb. He's gone now. He was a celebrity. I mean, like, there is nothing against a celebrity running for office. There's nothing against that. But I think that what is so hard about being president is that you need to know intricately how the government works. And part of the problem with Trump, and anyone who was coming from Trump's background, and Trump in particular, is that the learning curve is so steep to figuring out how to work with Congress and what you have to be doing and all the documents you need to be doing. And if you have some familiarity with that, at least having been a governor and having had to do that on the state level, or working with the Senate and having to work with this White House on one-on-one, like, you have to, especially when it comes to international relations where the president really doesn't have a check. Like, it worries me when we say, oh, well, let's, like, Oprah Winfrey should run for president just because she's so much better than Trump. She doesn't have experience. She has about as much experience in politics as she does with as Donald Trump did, and obviously she is much more in command of her mental capabilities and can say things that are inspiring and not degrading to someone else. But I think that we do need experience, and that absolutely needs to be a part of the recipe, and hopefully, because once our presidential elections reach junior high level where they're just a popularity contest, we're in trouble.
Yeah. And I have two more things on this Oprah thing. Like, one, like, does anybody know Oprah's stance on issues? Like, what's her stance on gun control? Yeah. What's her stance on tax reform? What's her stance on immigration? Like, where does she stand on these issues?
We no longer issue voters.
Yeah, like, all we know is, like, she obviously probably favors, like, women's rights because of her speech, but that's, like, that's one issue out of, like, 30 that we would want to hear from her. And two, honestly, at this point, Oprah has a bigger platform as a celebrity than she probably would as president.
Right.
Because people listen to Oprah. She is followed. She is loved. Like, I don't think I think she's peaked on her, on her, like, her effectiveness, her clout level. Yeah. Like, she's peaked.
Right.
I don't think running for president would do anything for her.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As far as, like, her status and position in society.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, I think that if the Democratic Party were to put her as their, like, to vote her into office, or to put her up as their nominee, how can they claim to be making a difference, right? How can they then claim that they're changing things in Washington? Because then we're back to a Trump administration, which admittedly Oprah's would be better, but we're still in the same position we are with someone who doesn't know what they're doing and having to learn the ropes, and then running the risk of them not understanding the impact of something that they're doing. I also have a small cosmetic issue with it. Like, would you call her President Oprah? Because President Winfrey, like, both of those... Like, I just... she'd be President
way
Winfrey,
more well known by her, like, first name.
Yeah, like, for a minute there, when I, like, totally forgot what her last name was for, like, half a second. I was like, President Oprah. I was like, oh, wait, that's her first name.
Yeah.
So.
Good point.
Over the break. Okay, one quick side note before we move on to politics. Over the break, BBC released a podcast that Prince Harry and President Obama recorded together. Good. And it was so good. It was, was wonderful. Okay, moving on.
It was.
I'll link to it so you can listen to it too.
Let's move on.
Don't listen to us anymore. Listen to them.
Politics. All right, politics. So the first one we have on our list is, like, a huge landslide of a Utah news and a little bit of a stirring nationally. So, longtime Senate Republican Orrin Hatch announced that he is retiring. He's not seeking re-election this year, which, hallelujah!
He's the oldest senator. He's the oldest Republican senator.
Mm-hmm. He's the longest serving
longest serving Republican senator. And, okay, he's been serving for, like, 40 years. He was elected in the 70s. So, as long as I have been alive, and almost as long as my parents have been alive, So
he's pretty old.
yeah,
It was time to go.
it was time.
It was time. And so...
And the problem is, the thing about Hatch retiring is that he has done some really great things in his time as a senator. Like, he's the one who created the CHIP program, which is the Children's Health Insurance Program. Mm-hmm. And he has done some really great things. But in the last year, he's done a lot of things that have made his constituents pretty upset. Like refusing to reauthorize CHIP. And pushing through the tax plan that is really going to impact thousands of millions of Americans. And so he's done some things in the last couple of days or the last couple of months that had really kind of put people on edge. And he's been a Trump supporter.
He sucked up to Trump a lot.
Oh my gosh. But before that, and Trump wanted him to stay in office. But before that, he did some really great things as a senator. And so I think that we're missing that. But it was really time for him to go.
I think, Utah will definitely, unless Mitt Romney runs, which we'll get to that in a second, Utah will definitely lose, some clout and some prominence, on the national stage, because Orrin Hatch was just so prominent. I mean, he was chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is huge. He's currently the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. He's also currently president pro temp of the Senate, which means he's third in line for the presidency. That's a big deal for a Utahn. And so we are going to lose that, seniority and prominence. But it is time for new blood.
It's time for new blood.
So...
Because when he ran against somebody who hadn't been in Congress for even that long, he was
his first
his
election.
Campaign slogan was something like...
What do you call a senator who's been in Washington too long?
Yeah.
You call him home.
Yeah, and so it's time to come Hatch home.
If Hatch would have run, that would have come back to bite him in the butt hard. Oh my gosh. Because he also promised in 2012 that would be his last election.
Yeah. Isn't he 83 or something like
He's
that? He's
pretty old.
I can't remember how old he is.
Also, on the Trump sucking up, he recently, after the tax reform passed, said that Trump was the best president we've ever had. Which was a little surprising coming from Orrin Hatch, who has served under a lot of presidents. What?
Yeah, and you're like, well, actually...
He's 83, yes.
Yeah, he's 83. And you're like, well, I guess
it was
there might be a yardstick.
Was a really odd comment hear utter from Orrin Hatch's mouth.
George Washington at all, ever? Or Lincoln? Or, I mean, even if you didn't like Lincoln's policies, he's better than Trump. Anyway, not important.
Anyway, so now rumors have been mounting for months, possibly almost up to a year now, that Mitt Romney was going to run. And so now that Orrin Hatch has retired, it is pretty much opened a path for Mitt Romney to run. Now, Mitt Romney hasn't said anything. He hasn't announced anything.
He does have ads running on Twitter, though.
I don't think those are from him, though.
You don't think so?
No, that's got to be a PAC or somebody.
Maybe.
But there is some subtle signs. A lot of people noticed he changed his location on Twitter from Massachusetts to Holiday, Utah. Yeah. And a lot of people are saying that he... his advisors and friends are starting to chatter out there. Reports are now out that his wife Anne is urging him to run. And Romney has 2 big speaking engagements next week. One is at a conference in Park City. It's an economic conference. The other is at the Silicon Slopes conference in Salt Lake, which would be a big platform to announce something.
So, anything.
When I saw the tweet that Mitt Romney was speaking in that, I was like,
wonder what that means.
So...
And honestly, if he were to run, it would be no contest. The poor Jenny Wilson, who is the Democrat running in that district, poor little Jenny Wilson has nothing notable to her name, and there's no way that she
can't compete against
There's no
Romney.
competing against Mitt.
Here's my thing is... I have two points on this real quick. I know we have a lot more to get to, so I'll make this quick. After this, we'll move on to another Senate race. One, a lot of people are hoping that Mitt Romney will be a foil to President Trump. He'll be antagonistic and really fight against him.
Stand up to him.
Really oppose him because, he gave that blistering speech back in March of 2016. It was blistering.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But, I wonder, is he going to be... What will he look like? What does Senator Romney look like?
What is... Right. Will he be middle of... I think he's probably going to be more middle of the road, but I don't think he's going to be Trump antagonistic. I think he'll be a middle of the road Republican, but we're not...
But he's not afraid to break from the president. I think he'll agree with the president when he agrees with him, but when he doesn't, I think he won't be afraid to break.
And a lot of people are like, okay, but what about that meeting he took with
Yeah.
Trump about the Secretary of State. Is that going to come back to hurt him? And I really don't think so. I think that he was doing his duty. Also, we got some really good laughs about those pictures of him looking like, what the heck am I doing here?
And those frog legs.
Yep, and the frog legs. But I think that Senator Mitt isn't going to look quite like Mitt Romney at the University of Utah calling out Donald Trump.
Probably not.
So.
And then my second quick point is, I wonder, and my dad kind of made this comment to me, is like, he's like, I wonder if Mitt he'll be good for the country as a senator, but will he be good for Utah?
Right.
Like, because he's such a big presence, he's a national figure. I wonder if that will almost be too much for him to try and represent Utah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So he could be a good senator, but like, will he be a good? I saw that. Will he be good for Utah?
Right. That'll be a big thing. And the thing about this too is that when Bannon, I don't remember what he said during the Alabama race, but something about Utah and whatever, and trying to flip Utah. What was it? Do you remember?
He's about Mitt Romney specifically?
I don't remember.
Because he criticized Mitt Romney and said, like, oh, you avoided the Vietnam War, you hid behind your church service, and you went on a mission, blah, blah, blah. Well, our people are out there dying for your lives, and everyone was like, whoa, 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 whoa.
And Governor Herbert was like, Bannon, you're not welcome here.
Yeah,
okay,
everyone's like, Bannon, stay out of Utah.
So it'll be really interesting. I think that at the very least, Bannon politics won't be welcome in Utah, and so that'll be nice. But that brings me to another point. So Joe Arpaio, if you remember, he is the sheriff in Arizona who was the sheriff in Arizona who did lots of illegal things and was pardoned prematurely before his trial by Trump. And he had these basically concentration camps for illegal immigrants that were treated very badly.
His tent city prison is super infamous.
Yeah,
look it up.
I mean, he's just kind of a terrible person and doesn't realize it. Okay, so he has announced his candidacy for Senate to take over Senator Flake's seat in Arizona, and that'll be interesting. I feel like Arizona might be the next Bannon playing field. That Bannon style politics. But we'll see if Arizona will go for Mr. Arpaio.
Because there's also two
very
other
distasteful
challengers for the Republican primary. There's Kelly Ward, who was planning this big mount against Jeff Flake, and then he retired, and she was like, oh, well, I guess I'll still run. So she's a little bit more populist, a little bit more extreme, but there's also a Representative McSally, I think is her name. She's planning a big announcement. She has big announcements coming up next month or next week. But she's she's a fighter pilot, and she seems like more middle of the road. So you have her who's more moderate. Then you have Kelly Ward, who's a little bit more to the right, and then you have Joe Arpaio, which is
oh my gosh,
all the way to the right.
The way.
So it'll be interesting to see who Arizona chooses. What's their flavor of conservatism?
Yeah.
Conservatism. How far to the right do they want to be?
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see what they choose.
I'm trying to remember how Arizona ended up on the Trump side of things in 2016, right?
Yes, they did.
So it'll be interesting to see if Arizona is the next Alabama.
Okay, we need to move on, and this is probably the bombshell story of the last few weeks.
Yeah.
A new book out by Michael Wolff called Fire and Fury Inside the Trump White House. And what he purports in this book is he was in the West Wing, he was in the White House, he had firsthand access to senior staff, he even claims to have spoken to the president for a short period of time. Mm-hmm. And it's a tell-all book of tell-all books that just lays out what everybody thinks about the president and how his administration is run. And there are some very negative comments, most notably from Bannon, who is quoted in the book as saying that Don Jr., his meeting with the Russians was treasonous.
He says some things about Ivanka. There are just a lot of flaming Bannon quotes in this. Mm-hmm. There's also reports of Trump going to bed earlier with a cheeseburger to watch, and a lot of executive time, to watch cable news. It reveals a lot about his personal schedule. So the White House makes it a big deal to put out his personal schedule, and it looks jam packed with stuff. But the real schedule tends to be full of executive time, which is basically just
cable news and tweeting.
Yeah. So So there's some really questions about what's going on inside the White House, what they're kind of getting done. And there wasn't anything like super bombshell in this. Like there wasn't anything about the way this White House was run that we didn't already know. But there is a lot about like a lot of comments that were made by people, senior people inside the White House that
they were on the record. Like
yeah. Well, and he chooses not to reveal some of their names, but they were on the record.
Okay, here's my thing. So here's the White House did the thing where they're like, don't look at this, but I'm going to talk about this over here, so it's going to make you want to, like, know and look it up even more. And that's exactly what they did.
And they've, like, Trump's lawyers have reached out
they
to
sent him
like,
a cease and desist
to
letter.
Bannon and to Wolf.
Like, and so the book publisher, the book wasn't supposed to come out for, like, a week or two. They moved up the publication date because of all the intense speculation. And, oh my gosh, the White House just dropped this ball because what they should have done is just said, that's not a story, nothing to see here, moving on. But they talked about it, and Trump's lawyers got all fired up, and they just went full
and they did the
defense on this, and it's like, the more you talk about it, the more people are curious, and so, like, book sales skyrocketed, like, it totally helped the book sales, and it's probably not what they should have done.
And I've seen a couple of people that, like, ordered it on Amazon and sent it to the White House. Like with Donald Trump's name on it.
That's great.
And then, but the other thing that they did about this was that with the whole, like, Bannon has been under fire for this. So what they did is they were like, they distanced themselves from Bannon in the way that the White House does.
So
where
fast.
they're like, he was just a worker on the campaign.
Oh!
The president didn't talk to him very much. There was no one-on-one time. And you're like, okay, but he was campaign chairman.
Trump,
first of all,
released a
and
statement
then he was
that said,
top advisor.
Bannon has nothing to do with me or my presidency.
And then you're like...
It's like, whoa, full stop.
Full stop. You put him on the National Security Council.
So much to do with you and your presidency.
I know.
Like, that is
so
such...
You're so full of crap.
Blowing it out of perspective.
Right. Well, they did the same thing with Carter Page. They did the same thing with George Papadopoulos. They did the same thing with Paul Manafort. Like, all these people who are, like, really close, and we know what their relationships are like because we've seen their emails and their schedules. Like, we know. Like, you can't hide
Bannon
this
was
from
not
us.
a small fish in the Trump orbit. He was like...
He was not the coffee boy.
He was chief strategist in the White House.
I know.
You're not, like, nothing to do with the president.
Like, he got himself put on the National Security Council. You cannot tell me that he did not have conversations with the president. And the thing is that they've got this little loophole. He did not have one-on-one conversations with the president. But we know that the staff does not leave anyone alone with the president because the president is so erratic that you need two people in the room to make sure that everything's okay.
I know.
Like,
Here's my other point about this book.
It's stupid.
That's bugging me. Is the administration, the West Wing, let Michael Wolff in.
Yeah. Oh,
like,
yeah.
They let him on the premises. They let him have free reign over the West Wing.
And President...
And the West Wing is not some public park in the middle of...
No.
Wisconsin. I mean,
if
the
we tried
West
to
Wing,
walk in right now, we would.
The
be
West
like,
Wing is
guns
like
pointed
the
at
White
us.
House complex is like one of the most secure places in the world. You can't just stroll up and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna walk in and do whatever I want."
Can't.
Like there are secret service agents crawling all over the place. I mean, they block off the streets. Like you don't just casually stumble into the West Wing. So they had to consciously make the decision to let him in and consciously allow him to be there continually. So like.
Well, and the president is making this distinction.
They're the only ones to blame for this book because they let him in.
And there's been a book like this for every president, forever and ever. Mm-hmm. Like there is always this. Anyway, but the point I'm trying to make is that like the president is saying I didn't give him credentials and I didn't let him in. And the president doesn't have time to figure out who to let him in. Like Obama didn't let the novelist in who, like that's not how this works. Like somebody in the White House let him in and gave him security. So the security clearance is to come in. So this is you can't claim that. Anyway, so as a result of this, Bannon has lost his backing from Rebecca Mercer, who is like this top, she's the biggest Trump supporter. She funds Breitbart News. So he has lost his backing of her, and that in turn means that he's lost his job at Breitbart News. So currently Bannon is jobless again, with nothing to fall back on.
He's an outcast right now.
Yep.
He has no one to support him anymore.
Right.
Which is a stunning fall, seeing as, like, he was, like, Trump's right-hand guy, like, in the summer.
Yep.
So it's interesting to see him fall from grace.
Yep. All right, moving on from that particular
Oh,
piece of
man.
news to North Korea, which is so much happier. So
A different kind of fire and fury.
yeah, a different kind of fire fury, which I think that that's such a lovely name that Wolf has chosen for his book, like to play on this fire and fury comment. Okay, so North Korea on New Year's Day, Kim Jong-un did his like national speech, blah blah blah, talked about like pretty much threatened the United States and said like the United States should be warned. I have a nuclear button that sits on my desk. So Trump tweets, and it's something along the lines of somebody in his starving, poor nation inform Kim Jong-un that I have a bigger and better button sitting on my desk. And
Gosh.
like this is elementary school, okay? This is like
Schoolyard taunts.
this is my sucker, it's bigger than your sucker, you know? And it's just so adolescent that I just, first of all, there is no button in Trump's White House.
There is one on his desk, and you want to know what it does? It
It
summons someone to bring him a Diet
Diet
Coke.
Like,
So,
which
watch out. Diet Coke coming through.
yeah. So this and that kind of antagonistic remark is not helping anything, first of all. Second of all, it's really not helping anything. So it's just like this really terrible, like I just can't understand why we would be taunting them, especially since they do have the capability to shoot off an ICBM with a well, we don't know if they can shoot off an ICBM with a nuclear attached, but they can launch bombs, and they can get a nuclear weapon to South Korea. So, like, maybe not, and to our bases there.
But
Right.
there is a silver lining. There is some thawing in relationships with North Korea. There's been some good news.
Not
recently.
between the U.S. and North Korea. Between North
the
Korea
North and South
Korea.
which they don't get along hardly ever.
No, but the thing that happened before we go into the thing you're going to get to
Okay.
is that they for a long time they had this like hotline in an abandoned village right on the DMZ, on the demilitarized zone, which is on the border. And they had this phone line that was a direct line from North Korea to South Korea, and they could talk and get some stuff done. But in 2015, that shut down. And so for the first time in Moon Jae-in's presidency, he's the new president in South Korea, there has been communication, direct line communication. They've reestablished those ties, and they've started calling each other again. They used to call each other every day. And now they have started reestablishing those ties and opening up the phone line again. And part of that led to negotiations about the thing you were going to talk about.
Yes. So the North and South met for formal talks this week at the DMZ, like just across the border at one of those border towns. And the main topic on discussion was the Olympics. So the South Korean government, specifically President Moon, has been wanting the South to send a delegation to the Winter
North
Olympics
to send a delegation
in South Korea next month. Because the thinking behind that is if North Korea sends a delegation, they will be less likely to do anything to provoke the games or do anything to disrupt it. They won't do missile tests, nuclear tests. They won't try anything because their people are there.
We figure that they value their people's lives enough to do that.
So
because the biggest worry from some of the Western nations has been like, well, I don't know if we should send a delegation.
Yeah.
Like, they're gonna die. You know, like it's been from some of the European nations.
Yeah,
that
France was toying that idea for a minute.
France was worried about it for a minute. Like, we're worried that our athletes aren't going to be safe, and so they wanted this reassurance. That's not to say that North Korea could go totally crazy and be like, whatever, we don't care about our people either, because there's not a lot of emphasis placed on their lives. But when it comes to like these elite people who are actually capable of winning medals, like the ice skaters, the ice skating pair, figure skating pair is actually really good and qualified for the Olympics. So
so they had this big formal like talks and negotiation, and the North agreed to send a delegation, and it sounds like they're gonna send a quite sizable delegation. Like I heard like a dancing squad or like a cheerleading squad and like a taekwondo like group, and like I don't know.
Taekwondo, isn't that a summer?
Yeah, I don't know why. I've just seen like lots of reports of like more than just athletes. Like they're gonna send a sizable delegation, which is huge. Like this is a big win for the North Korea side because lately they've been so antagonistic and just trying and like not willing to talk. And so this is a really big breakthrough. And I think it's awesome. Like, this is what the Olympics are all about. It's about international unity, coming together through sport, and just kind of putting everything aside. And there's even talk of possibly for the North and South to march together under one flag, a unified Korean flag.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, they've done it before at, like, some games. They've done it once before. And South Korea really wants that to happen, so it's under negotiation. It's not confirmed, but that would be really cool.
That would be cool. That's one of the goals of North Korea and South Korea is they both see the reason. So technically, the Koreas are still at war. There was never a laying down of arms. There was never a treaty. There was not there was just like this armistice. So they just stopped fighting one day, but the ultimate goal of both nations is to see they both see themselves as the legitimate Korean state, and so they both want that in the end. So that is the idea of marching under one flag is an interesting one. This is the first Winter Olympics that the North has attended in I think 8 years. I think was the number. They did have that weightlifter who won gold in the Summer Olympics though.
Yeah, they sent a delegation to Rio.
Okay, so last thing on our list is the Iranian protests. Those have been going on for a couple of weeks now. They're pretty much they've spread across the entire Iran, but they weren't planned, and a lot of them are like so these protests. Let me back up. So there's these protests in Iran, and they started outside of the capital of Tehran, and then they kind of have spread across the country, and they're mostly the middle class protesting the fact that they have seen very little economic growth. Because one of the promises that was promised to them by President Rouhani when they were engaging in the Iranian nuclear deal with the United States was that because they'd be lifting these sanctions, that the economy would grow, and they haven't seen the amount of growth that they expected, and so they're protesting the government economic practices and the government. And there's been a lot of like speculation as to who is provoking these attacks and all this stuff. The Ayatollah Altai Khamenei, he has said that they know it's the United States and they're going to do something about it, and they know it's outside actors, and it's just this kind of become this big thing. And for a while there, and I don't know if he still feels this way, but President Trump was tweeting support for the protesters, and because they needed they deserve freedom and the rights that they want or whatever. And then Nikki Haley was trying to whip up support in the Security Council for these protests as well. And so there's this kind of like interesting idea where the United States is backing these protesters, and it's been a little bit of discord for me, because I truly believe that the Iranian people deserve better, but I also believe that the United States should not be backing this. I think that we should stay out of it and let them do their thing, because in the end, this is not something that we should be getting involved in. We should not be egging on the demise of the Iranian government. I don't know that we could handle that. And so I think that it's dangerous behavior on the side of the government, even though I, in practice, agree with what they're saying, which is not normal for me. So it's just one of those things that these protests have been going on for at least 2 weeks now, almost 3, and it's this huge thing that is going on right now in a part of the world that we don't get to hear about very much. And they haven't cracked down yet, but the crackdowns could be coming. And right now they've been largely there. I think people have died in some of them. And so, and there's just no like organizing force. So it's just these kind of organic protests that have been popping up and going on. And it's kind of interesting that the United States is jumping in there. So that's the last of politics for this week. There are a lot of other stories, but like I said, we had to...
So many other things. Woo!
We had to thin it out a little bit.
Okay. All right. We do have a soapbox. I know we're running long, so we'll try and make this quick. So, the gist of tonight's soapbox is that words matter.
Yep.
Especially when you're in positions of power, like, say, the President of the United States. You can't just say whatever you want and, like, pretend that nobody will hear it or react to it.
Right.
Like, when you're the president, you have such a large megaphone and pulpit. That's why they call it the bully pulpit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it came out in the Washington Post, kudos to them, that Trump was in a meeting talking about immigration, because there's a lot of immigration deals, and they're trying to get that through Congress recently. And he said...
I have the quote.
Some interesting comments about some countries.
Yeah, so he said, so they were talking about Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries, right? They were discussing protections for immigrants in those countries. And he said, quote, "Why are we having all these people from bleep whole countries come here?" Close quote. And you're like, first of all,
whoa.
Yeah, you should. First of all, the president should never say anything like that. Like that's. I mean, he said some terrible things before, but this is the first time he's sworn about a country, and I think that's like.
It's just sad. But if you know Donald Trump, which by this point you should, he is vulgar. Like he swears.
Yeah.
He has no issue.
I mean, have you seen the tape?
He called NFL players sons of a bee, like at a rally at an official presidential event. So,
but the problem,
we should not be surprised,
right,
but we should be outraged,
right?
Because you can't just say stuff like that. I mean, you are the president of the United States,
right?
You can't just trash around countries and what a privileged brat. I mean. Sorry that people in Haiti are so poor. What are you supposed to say?
People in El Salvador have been
murdered, and they have a brutal civil war.
Brutal civil war and earthquakes, so they needed our protection for a little while.
Of course, Trump's gonna call him that kind of a place because he's lived in a golden penthouse his whole life.
Right.
It's just so insensitive and so rude, and it's is that really who's speaking for our country?
Because I don't want that representing me, right? I don't want that people's perception, because that some new, in I don't know, Portugal, some kid is just tuning into the news for the first time, and he's hearing this from the American president, and someday he's going to meet someone from my country, and he's going to ask them if they also believe that Haiti and El Salvador and Africa are all squares. He's going to ask those questions because this is what he's seeing from our president. And our president's demeanor matters. And we've been talking about that for months. And this is just one more insult in a long line that have caused outrage and horror to come from everyone.
Yeah, you said it well.
Words matter.
Especially when you're the president of the United States.
Words matter no matter who you are and what you say. Because words harm. No matter what. That old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, is wrong. Words hurt. And he is using his bully pulpit to actually bully.
It's sad.
Yep.
And on that lovely note, we will leave you until next week.
Yep. See ya.